My name is Bryce Sargent. I have been a workplace safety professional for nearly 20 years. I absolutely love what we do, and I have trained over 100 safety managers. Today, we are talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is closing the gender gap as a safety professional. And hopefully that doesn't turn you off and you're just like, oh my gosh, Bryce, just turning off feminism on me. I have got a lot of facts and figures that I want to share with you. And you might be thinking, like, I have no control over this. I don't hire anybody. But if you are running a safety program, you have a ton of control over helping us close this gap. So please stick with me. So let me tell you a story. So first off, just so you know that my background on this is I do have my degree in psychology. And then when I was able to select electives as I was going for my degree, I selected a lot about gender equity and all of that because I was part of a gender equity survey that was done nationwide where I got the results and it was just shocking to me. And then I started looking into the research on how you actually fix the problem and why did the problem exist? Because 20 years ago, when I started off in safety, I was in the trucking industry. When my first very dedicated safety job, I was in the trucking industry. There were not very many truck drivers that were female 20 years ago, let alone the safety managers in the truck driving industry. I went to American Trucking Association meeting in Washington, D.C. my very first year. And yes, there were women there, but only a handful. And at that time, you got to realize I was in my 20s. I did not see a problem with it. I just assumed, women just weren't picking this as a field. Why would anybody want to be around a bunch of truck drivers, as a woman? I loved it, but, it was whatever. So I just didn't see it was a problem. But over my career, I have seen this to be a huge issue. And then when I actually went into businesses that had a lot of diversity and a lot of gender equity, what I saw was those businesses ran better. They made more money. Their programs were better. It was amazing. So that was another reason why I kind of gravitated towards this topic. I want you to understand that gender equality does not mean 100% female safety staff, okay? That's not good either. It is 50-50. It is matching the demographics in your safety department with the demographics of your population in your surrounding area and your customer base too, right? So if you have gender equality, it means that it's equal to whatever the general population is. And in the United States, or in the world, sorry, the population is 50-50. So even when you have a 100% female run department, it's not ever going to do as good as one that is 50-50. Just like a 100% male department does not do as good as one that is 50-50. So let's put that across the board there. I'm not bashing men here. I am just saying we want to make this equal because it actually makes the business stronger. And there are two words that you hear in this topic, and that is equality and equity. So equality means that everybody gets the same thing, right? That's the 50-50. And equity means everybody gets whatever they need to succeed because we're all not starting from the same starting line. Some of us are starting behind that starting line. And the research has actually shown that women are starting behind that starting line for several reasons, and I'll try to get into them here. Talking about gender equality in the safety profession, in a 2019 survey from the National Safety Council, they found that 24.8% of respondents were women. But our population is 50%. But still, it's increasing. We're doing better over time. I actually find these numbers surprising because I have been training safety managers. I've been dedicated training safety managers for the past 4 years. That's all I've done is train safety managers. Only 10% of them are filled with women. So if this number is 24.8, I don't know where the other 14.8 are. I would have a classroom of 30 people and maybe 2 or 3 of them were women. It could have been just my field, my area, but I was in general industry, which generally would have more women than a construction or transportation. So I don't know. So that was the survey. So obviously there's a problem there. And why does this problem exist? And it kind of exists twofold, right? So I'm going to talk about biases, but first I also want to talk about some brain chemistry too. So the way our brains are wired is that we like to be around people that look like us, that act like us, that talk like us, that are like us, right? So we have this tribe mentality in our brains. So we are automatically going to be attracted to hang out with people that are like us. So because of that, you end up like, if you're a male safety manager, you might end up hiring a male safety specialist or a male safety clerk or whatever it is that happens to be in your department. Or you might gravitate to like, let me talk to the men to be on my safety committee. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way your brain is wired, right? So that's one of the problems. The other problem is that we have this thing called biases. So biases are different than prejudice and racism. So biases is a preference or a tendency towards a certain aspect of a person. So in this case, we're talking about gender. Prejudice is when you actually like have a preconceived notion about somebody because of a difference. And racism is where you have like a hatred or an antagonism because of the difference. So prejudice and racism, I think we can all agree is like 100% wrong. That's where you might see things like people saying, well, women just can't do this job. Or, women are just too emotional to do this job. I've heard that one a lot too, which is kind of funny because I'll talk about that research in a minute. The problem is actually falling under biases. So it's something that's happening that we have control over, but we kind of feel like we don't have control over it. We feel like it's just happening. So where that comes from is that you have these implicit biases, meaning that you don't even realize that you have these tendencies. And that's where we need to increase our awareness that we have these tendencies and actually take deliberate actions to make changes. The thing is that it is changing, right? So like 24.8% of safety managers being female is amazing. Like 20 years ago, I'm sure that number was way lower. I probably should have looked that up. But so we are making progress. But the research has shown that if we don't actually take steps, that we don't actually take deliberate steps to make changes in it, it's going to take 200 years for that change to happen. And why would that matter to you? You're like, I'm not going to be here 200 years from now. I don't care. Things are fine for me right now, right? I mean, I love what I do. I'm a safety manager and I'm successful. Why should I care about it, right? The reason why you want to care about it is, one, you might have a daughter like me, right? So the changes you make now could help future generations. And two, companies that are diverse in both gender and race make more money. If they're more successful and they're making more money, that gives you job security. And what I have seen in safety programs, when they have diversity, it's easier to implement their stuff because you're kind of taking into account the population of your employees. So that's why it matters to us, okay? And you might be thinking like, well, there's differences between men and women. That's why there's more male safety managers than female safety managers. And other than muscle mass, there is actually no difference between men and women. And this is so funny because I was having coffee with a friend of mine a little while ago, and this actually came up. I don't even remember what we were talking about. And I was like, no, the only difference is muscle mass. Oh, I think we were talking about the Olympic swimmers and transgender and things like that. And I was like, well, yeah, there's a muscle mass difference. And she's like, no, there's all these other differences. And it's like, no, look at the research. The only difference is muscle mass. And that's it. So you might say, well, because there's this muscle mass difference, then they can't do the job because they can't physically do the job. Now, I've been doing safety for 20 years. I have never had to physically do the job that I was monitoring to be a safety manager. And honestly, I was a CrossFitter for several years and I could lift more than a lot of the men that I knew. So physically, I could have done the job. So that's kind of like, you can't really use that as an excuse. But what you have to think of between the difference between men and women is that everything else is equal. Intelligence is equal. Emotions are equal. Like they've actually studied that where they say women are more emotional than men. They've studied it. No, it's equal. There's no significant difference. Decision making, equal. The only place where they actually found any significant difference, and it was so minor that they're not even calling it a significant difference, is in leadership skills. Women are actually more effective in leadership than men are, but it is so tiny that they just kind of don't even really apply it to anything. I mean, we're talking, it was probably like 5.1% or something like that. So the other argument is that then it has to be a biases. And this is the most interesting research I want to share with you. And if you're a man watching this, you'll be like, oh my gosh. So I love this idea. So anyway, the average height of a man in the United States is 5'6". And you might disagree with this, but if you look it up, that's what it is. It's 5'6". So if you're 5'6" or taller, you are average or you are higher than average, right? The percentage of men in the United States that are over 6 feet tall is only 14%. However, the percentage of CEOs that are over 6 feet tall is 58%. Does your height have anything to do with whether or not you would be a good CEO? No. It's an implicit bias that we believe taller people are better at their jobs, that taller people are more effective, that they are better leaders, that they can sell more. Believe it or not, it's true. I am at such a disadvantage of this because I am only 5 foot tall. You probably can't tell because I'm on video, but I'm only 5 foot tall. I literally have to walk into meetings wearing 4 or 5 inch heels, and I get better response than when I walk in wearing flats. I'm dead serious about this. I started wearing heels when I was a teenager because of it. So now let's take that same CEO example and talk about education. So 64% of CEOs have their master's degree in whatever degree that they have. They have their master's degree, which then you go, okay, that makes sense. They're CEOs. They have to be smart. So yeah, they have their master's degree. But however, since the year 1985, more women have received their master's degree year over year than men do. So that means there are more women in the population with their master's degree than men. However, only 6% of CEOs are female. Why is that? That is how we know it is biases and that it is not, a difference between men and women or anything like that. It has to do with the fact that we have a bias that women are the second gender. And that's not anybody's fault. Bias comes from society and cultural and the way our brains are wired, right? So we have to be deliberate to get rid of that bias. How can we solve this problem? So first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that it is a problem. I mean, I have a lot of friends, female and male, that acknowledge this is not a problem. I mean, I love the comment going like, this is a conference for women, where's the conference for men? And I'm just like, every conference is for men. Because if you think about it, when you go to a safety conference, it's maybe only like 20% women. It's 80% men. So that's why we have to have our own like women's conferences. So it's that way you can have, the people that will come talk about the issues that are affecting women. So first it's acknowledging it. So, and this is a really interesting test that you can take. It is called the Implicit Bias test. This is from Harvard, and you can actually test and see where your biases are. And be prepared because women are biased against women too. It's not just like men are biased against women. No. Women are too. It's even one race is biased against their same race. It's really an incredible thing. So when you take the test, don't feel bad about yourself. All it is about is gaining awareness that the bias is there. So if you know the bias is there, then you can actually do something about it. So 2, what we're currently doing got us here. So you have to understand that you have to take deliberate steps to change it. So one of the steps you can do is when you're hiring. So when you're hiring, you need to purposely seek out diverse applicants, which means your hiring process may take longer. And you may say, well, I'm not hiring anybody until I have applicants from every gender, applicants from every race. And you can tell your HR department to hide their gender and their race. You can even have them hide their names because the names kind of give them a hint as to what their gender is. And if you're anything like me, you are jumping on LinkedIn to see that applicant's LinkedIn profile almost immediately, right? But during the first phase of hiring, you got to actually stop yourself and say, no, I'm not going to look because I don't want to bias my opinion. Make sure that you have every gender and race included in your pool when you are going to hire somebody. And secondly, don't just look at their experience. Look at their potential to succeed. So I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I see it all the time. Companies will promote from within, which sounds like an amazing thing that, you can start off as a janitor and end up a CEO one day, right? I've actually seen that happen. But the problem with that generally is that when they're promoting from within, they are picking the person that is maybe the most productive, has the most sales, does the job the best. That person isn't necessarily the best leader. So it's the same thing in your applicant pool, that you have to look at potential to succeed and not necessarily that they worked in your industry before or they've done the job before. So really kind of look at like, would they be able to be a leader? What are their communication styles? How could they manage the department? That type of thing. What are their writing skills, their technical skills, their presentation skills? Those things tend to be more important than did they ever work in this industry before? Because industry can be taught, especially in safety. And that's one of the things that really annoys me. Like, I got a comment the other day that said if I ever worked in the construction department, I would get eaten alive or something like that. And I'm like, safety is safety is safety. I can work in any industry. I can work for any company because safety is about keeping people safe and doing the right thing and looking out for hazards, regardless of what those hazards are. And heck yes, I could work in construction. And you might be thinking, I don't hire anybody. This doesn't affect me. I'm a single safety person in my company. I don't have a staff. I'm not hiring anybody. Can't do anything about it, Bri. Well, if you include employees in your program, if you have a safety committee, if you have employee involvement where you get people to review your programs, if you have employees that are doing like employee to employee coaching, mentoring, reviewing programs, anything like that, then yeah, you have a role to play. Your safety committee should be just as diverse as the population of your workforce. So when you're picking safety committee members, you want to make sure, like, if your staff is 50-50 men and women, you got to have a 50-50 men and women safety committee. Same thing with gender. Same thing with race as well, ethnicity and all that good stuff. And what will that do for you? That will make your safety committee so much more effective because you'll get this diversity of opinions. And then whatever they create and whatever they go to put out there is going to be accepted so much better. So think about that too, is that you do have a role to play here, because I kind of look at like safety committee members as being our leaders of tomorrow. So many times I would lose my safety committee members because they would promote out. They would end up becoming team leaders or supervisors, or they'd go work for another company at a higher position. So you were giving them that education and experience that they need. You could be helping to close that gap, because the gap actually starts there. It actually starts in elementary school, because we actually treat women differently in elementary school compared to men. So it ends up just building and building and building. So when you're looking at closing the gender gap, they actually look at those lower level positions, like who are you picking for safety committee? Who are you picking to be your team leaders? Because that way you're getting them into that funnel so that they are available to become CEOs, that they have the experience that they need to be CEOs. Or in our case, where they could be safety managers or directors or, VPs or whatever it happens to be, right? You're giving everybody the same chance. As a safety manager, all I can tell you is that to help us close this gap, you need to make an effort to put everything that you do and put some diversity in it. And, your intention, shapes your approach. So if I'm hiring, I am a white female. If I'm hiring, then I want to hire somebody who is opposite of me. Maybe it's a male, maybe it's somebody of a different race, maybe it's somebody of a different age, right? So you want to keep it as diverse as possible. So then when you're looking at your team, let's say you have two people, you have a man, you have a woman, then the next person you hire needs to be of a different race. That's how you have diversity, because you have intention in your hiring. And you may think like, oh, that's not fair because it's you're picking one person over the other, but it's not. You're giving them an opportunity. And because of the fact that diversity actually makes the workplace better, you're doing something that's better for your company. And the other thing I want you to do is just be curious. Take the implicit bias test from Harvard and just be curious and really look at what you're doing and seeing is this a bias that I'm putting in place here? Or is this really true? Right? So let me give you an example from my life. I have a 25-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. I tend to listen to my son more. And I try to justify it because I go, well, he's older. That's why I listen to him more. But my daughter has a genius IQ. So, I mean, she's just as smart as he is. And why do I do that? So, a lot of times I look at it like, am I putting a bias in place here? I probably am. So, look at like, how are you justifying it? And is it a bias? And what can I do about it? That means that if my son picks dinner one night, then I have to make sure my daughter picks it the next night. It's not that she gets to pick it more than him, it's equal, right? So you could do the same thing in your safety program. And what'll happen is that over time, instead of it taking 200 years, we'll start closing that gap a lot quicker because we'll be giving people the opportunities that they wouldn't normally get if our biases were in place. I appreciate you guys allowing me to stand on my soapbox today and talk about this topic that I love to talk about. And I hope it made a difference. And I hope that you got a lot from it. And please share this video. And I will chat with you guys next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.